Welcome to Super Talk Outdoors, where every single Monday at lunchtime we celebrate the world class outdoors of the state of Mississippi because this is the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi radio network. Some of you are listening to Super Talk Outdoors on supertalk.fm, Amazon Alexa, the Super Talk Mississippi app, or on Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. I want to thank you for that. But some of you are actually watching the show on YouTube or Facebook, are listening potentially on your favorite podcast. We appreciate you doing that as well. We try to be there whenever, wherever you want to engage in this show. And it's March the 3rd, 2025. All right, folks, here's the latest legislative update from Super Talk Outdoor for Super Talk Outdoor listeners as of today. We're diving back into the wild turkey stamp bill, making its way through the Mississippi legislature. Yep, it's round two for this one. And the harvest bill is also round two for that one. First, the turkey stamp bill. Last year, the turkey stamp bill had all the promise of a good hunt, but ended up flat as a pancake. The House and the Senate each passed their own versions, nearly identical, and it looked like a done deal, which would have added over $1 million lined up for turkey conservation. But somewhere along the line, a few folks in the Senate thought the House dropped the ball on the promise, and the whole thing fell apart in the final stretch. It was a real head scratcher, and it cost Mississippi over $1 million, leaving those turkeys strutting away without any extra support. Fast forward to this legislative session, and they're giving it another go. House Bill 553 flew through the House back in January with a 103 to 12 vote. And the Senate bill 2280 cleared the Senate in February 42 to 7. Same plan, $10 for Mississippi hunters, $100 for out-of-staters, all to spruce up turkey habitat and dig into how to maintain the Mississippi wild turkey success story. House Wildlife Committee Chairman Bill Kincaid has said they've ironed out last year's wrinkles, and with both bills moving strong, there's hope this time. But here's the catch. It's got to survive this critical time in the legislature where it tripped up last year. Some saw a video of the Senate Wildlife Committee meeting last week and read a little bit too much into it. And by the way, I don't blame them. I admit it was a little bit hard to watch. If you didn't know the energy still engaged around this bill and the energy to get it done this year. I had a good exchange with the Senate Wildlife Committee Chairman, Senator Ben Suber. He seems highly motivated to work with the House to get it done this year. Will it make it to the governor's desk? And will we see a repeat of last year's fumble? I've got my fingers crossed because I'd rather hear a gobble in the woods than excuses in Jackson. Stick with Super Talk Outdoors and we'll keep you in the loop as this one unfolds. Now the Mississippi Harvest Reporting Bill that got hunters buzzing and some senators maybe scratching their heads. The big push this year is House Bill 816, which passed the House on January the 28th with a solid 79 to 28 vote. It's all about making hunters report their white-tailed deer harvest through an easy online system or app. Think of it like texting your buddy about that big buck, but instead you're sending a text to the Mississippi Department of Wildlife instead. The idea, get better data to manage deer populations, track things like chronic wasting disease, and keep our hunting grounds thriving. Well, it may have hit a speed bump in the Senate. As of now, a House Bill 816 is sitting in the Senate Wildlife Fisheries and Parks Committee, and there's no word on the vote yet. The hold up, I think some senators are twitchy about ruffling feathers. Yours, the hunters, they're worried about the politics. But Mississippi is the last state in the nation without mandatory deer reporting. Past attempts, like in 2022, we found the same result, couldn't get it through. Hunters have been split. Some say it's a no-brainer for conservation. Others grumble it's a hassle or a step toward more rules. But we have it with other species, and those of us in the fishing community in coastal Mississippi or from the rest of the state who comes down here to go fishing, you've seen that it's used very effectively with managing red snapper, for example. Bill Kincaid, who's spearheading this, pointed out that we've got a deer management system, but no real way to check the scorecard. It's like fishing without a scale. He's promising it will be painless, and I agree. Report via your phone, done. But with the session clock ticking, the Senate still is chewing it over. It's anyone's guess whether this bill bags the win or gets left in the woods like last time. I'll say it's less than 50-50 based on what I'm hearing. Depends on if the senators decide hunters can handle a little homework. Keep your ears on SuperTalk Outdoors. We'll let you know if this one trots across the finish line or, trips over the politics again. If it doesn't pass, though, given that Mississippi is the only state not reporting deer harvest, and understanding that this data is critical to managing the deer conservation in our state and disease management efforts as well, I would think that the law enables the department to act without legislation. Let's look into this. It's something we should really consider. There's a sense of urgency to get this done. Mississippi is a deer management leader in this nation. We need to stay that way. We need more leadership to help us get deer harvesting reporting done. Okay, now let's shift gears and look back on this year's duck season. I'm thrilled to be joined by Houston Havens, who's head of the white waterfowl program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and a good friend of this show. Houston, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. I'm doing really good. It's a little cool outside. It feels like we should be outside hunting, doesn't it?
It is. It's just kind of in that roller coaster period, up and down. You never know what we're going to get.
My wife Ann said that the thermostat inside the house is confused.
It is.
We bought a new, it's a digital thermostat that you can control from your app, and it's got AI built in, so it looks at your habits in the house, and it changes the temperature, has a sleeping mode. Does all this automatically. It knows when we left the house, turns it up. It knows when we're coming back, and it puts it back to the preferred temperature. It's really cool, but it's still a little confused even with the weather outside. That's for sure. Listen, fishing coastal Mississippi has been really, really good. We had a big freeze, and so there's an impact at the barrier islands. In fact, my son Jordan was out this weekend fishing, and he saw a bunch of deer carcasses still, and deer carcasses, speckled trout carcasses is what I meant to say. And he said it was really odd because that snow was a while ago, and he said some of the fish are still kind of preserved. They're not rotting as rapidly as you think they would be. I think the cool weather is part of that. He said also, I think since there were so many, the birds are obviously eating them, but there's so many they haven't been able to eat them all. He still caught some redfish and some flounder. He tagged a 40-inch redfish. And we actually put a video of that at SuperTalk Outdoors Facebook page if people want to go look at it. But water was clear and beautiful. He was sight casting for black drum and red fish. He said it was just absolutely a blast. We were originally thinking about doing some tuna fishing and wahoo fishing, but with Mardi Gras balls and all that, it was a little bit too tight a window to try to get all that done. But it's a fun time of year, man. We're transitioning into some great fishing here in coastal Mississippi. Do you like to fish yourself?
I do. Talking about transitioning into a great time of year. In my opinion, one of the best spring days I can have in the outdoors is to go on a successful turkey hunt, to find a shed antler and to catch brim with a fly rod. And I've been able to do that just a couple of times in the same day in my life. And that's kind of what I shoot for a lot of times in mid-March, early April.
Well, listen, I can't agree more, man. I've got 4 grandkids. My son has 2 kids, and then my daughter has 2 kids, but they love time in the outdoors. This time of year is a fun time of the year to bring them to the farms that we hunt turkey in South Mississippi, because we do a lot of scouting, and then there's these wonderful little farm lakes or farm ponds that we can fish in. And that's a lot of fun. And, it's about to be full on turkey season, and it's exciting. I mean, as we barrel toward it, I mean, it is we're here to talk about ducks, and we will, but it is a great success story when you consider the wild turkey story in Mississippi, isn't it?
It is a lot of work, a lot of research has gone through Mississippi State University and Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks in Mississippi. You're right, just a really tremendous success story. Looking back on where we were in previous decades to where we are now.
Yeah, our forefathers were so smart the way they did that, and in areas where there were no turkeys at all, we've got the opportunity to see them in mass, and it's really awesome. And as my friend Will Primos has said many times on this show, when you go turkey hunting, it's like living. He doesn't have to pray because he's in a prayer. It's a divine experience being in God's creation. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Havens. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate the capital of the outdoors in America, Mississippi. Listen, are you looking to purchase your perfect piece of hunting property, upgrade your farm equipment, or have you been dreaming of owning your slice of heaven out in the country? Look no further than Mississippi Land Bank for your financing needs. For more than 100 years, farming families and landowners in North Mississippi have turned to Mississippi Land Bank for all kinds of financial solutions, whether it's for land, equipment, or livestock. For more information, visit mslandbank.com or go by and see one of their friendly staff at any of their offices. We're thrilled to have Mississippi Land Bank as one of our sponsors. So let's get back to our conversation with Houston Havens from the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, who's head of the waterfowl program. When we went to break, though, we're talking about the great story around turkey hunting in Mississippi and conservation. I really hope, and I feel confident that the turkey stamp will get passed this year, and that's good. We around 1.5 million, and then there's a possibility of some federal matching funds that could go with that. This would be great for conservation efforts in our state. And if there's a great story, it's our turkey story. And so not only are Mississippi hunters finding that great story, but also people from outside Mississippi are finding it as well. So there's a lot of stress on that resource. And we need all the tools we can get and all the money we can get to not only manage it, but also focus on conservation efforts in the state. Hey, by the way, before we move to ducks, do you have the opportunity to spend time in the woods turkey hunting?
I do. It's largely weekends, but I live fortunate enough to live on a farm that's really close to some deer and turkey hunting property we have access to, and so it doesn't take me long to get into the deer woods or the turkey woods, and so I try to go when I can. When weather's good. I had a really good year last year, and seeing a lot of turkey sign in the woods, in late winter, moving into the spring so far.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. My son Jordan and his friend Jake Carter, they have the affliction big time. I think once you get it at the level they got it, they'll go to their graves with that affliction, and they love being there and chasing the turkeys. That is for sure. Hey, listen. Speaking of we got a lot to talk about related to the duck season. My friends purchased some property adjacent to some land that I lease. In fact, the guy I lease it from is in partnership with my friends to buy this 500 acres that's adjacent to it. It's got this 100-acre cypress pond. It's got flooded, timber. It's just beautiful, beautiful, duck habitat. It's got some great memory on it for gadwall but you'll occasionally greenhead, lot of teal. And again, when they're there, they can be there in force. It started out this year being a good season, and then it went flat. And there was a lot of promise to this season. A lot of cold weather up north. We got some rain finally. We were starting to get snow up north. The reports coming out of places like Arkansas were very positive, and northwest Mississippi, along the river, you're starting to see some good reports. But it just kind of hit with a thud. It just didn't really go anywhere. I got a note from someone yesterday that sent me a picture of a lot of ducks in the Delta areas of Mississippi, but this is long after the season had passed. Is that going to be the way it's going to be now? We're going to see a lot of ducks, after the season's over?
Well, some years certainly that is the case. Typically, what we run into a lot. Let me back up. So our aerial waterfowl surveys that we do throughout the fall and winter every year, we're able to track waterfowl abundances across the Mississippi Delta. A few years, maybe 2 or 3 in the past, we've actually flown in February just to kind of get at this phenomenon that people, they're driving down the road and they see a wetland off the side of the road with a lot of ducks in it. Maybe they weren't there during the hunting season. What typically we see there is what we call the board pooling effect. Especially across the Mississippi Delta, a lot of the available water during the hunting season is ag water, and that water is pretty quickly drained off at the end of January because, of course, farmers are using it for their livelihood and they're trying to get that water off to get ready for prepping those fields and spring planting. So what we see in the few times that we've flown February surveys is habitat goes way, way down, so it's much more limited resource. And the birds that are coming through, maybe they're back on spring migration from the Gulf Coast areas, or birds that are just still hanging around here in the Mississippi Delta. They're just more concentrated. Also, they're not pressured, and so they're moving into those areas that have been hunted really hard. And so it's kind of a complex situation there, but what we usually see is that they're just the birds that are remaining here are just kind of concentrated into that limited habitat.
Yeah, that's a very viable viable explanation. I mean, the fact is, one of the biggest challenges we have is the loss of habitat. It's real, and it's a major factor in this overall discussion. And where farmers and duck hunters have worked together to create habitat, usually it involves flooding fields, creating sheet water. And as you said, once those boards start getting pulled, because they're trying to, they're trying to get that land dried up a bit so they can start the planting process.
Sure.
It's happening in mass in the Mississippi Delta, isn't it?
It is, and we certainly did get some help from rainfall compared to the previous season. This past season, we got rains that helped a lot, but we didn't get a whole lot of overbank flooding from our interior Delta river systems. The Mississippi River stayed relatively low throughout the wintertime. And then after the duck season, we get into February and we got some big rains, and some of those rivers did pulse out. Talking with some of the managed duck clubs and WMA managers across the state, they saw ducks really respond quickly to that flood water, which is pretty typical. We just didn't catch it during the duck season this year, unfortunately.
Yeah. Man, I had a couple of videos sent to me from Arkansas. And man, I have never seen so many ducks in one area in my life where these videos came from. And I mean, it was teal, it was greenheads, and it was thousands and thousands of them. I mean, it was unbelievable. There's so many theories, and you and I have talked about all these theories. They're blocking them north of us. That's that, and maybe there's some truth to that. There's some blocking going on. There's some weather consequences. There's habitat consequences. It's a myriad of issues. But is there, think about the deer story in Mississippi is such a positive story. We're such a leader in that area. The wild turkey story is such a great story. We're leaders in that area. Even the alligator, it's great. But there's only so much we can do as it relates to duck because it's a migratory species. It's a U.S. focus that has to occur in order, and Canada, for a matter of fact, in order for us to have the kind of success that we want to have here. I wish we had more control over it, Houston.
That's right, and just like you said, weather is the key factor there. Not only for migration, which is what we talk about a lot here in Mississippi, but we've got to have water on the prairies. We've had relatively dry conditions for several years in a row. We know that with breeding populations of ducks, they can still have boom years when the prairies are wet, but it takes. Right now is a really critical time. With snowpack throughout the winter, there's still some opportunity for more snow to build up. That snow eventually melts in the spring and flows down into those really important wetland areas for waterfowl production. And so, weather is key year round, really, for waterfowl.
Well, I mean that again. That's the story. I mean, I remember us having conversations about mallards where the hatch was down more than 50% in these areas, And when that happens, I mean, there's no way to not have impact here. That's just the way it works. And you pointed out there could be also great hatch years. Maybe now that we've had kind of more traditional, very cold weather, lots of snow, as you pointed out, that is going to create the kind of habitat scenarios that would actually increase that hatch again. When you look at that on a scale, is it up and down constantly, or is it steadily going down? I mean, what do you see?
It's certainly up and down. Not, I wouldn't say constantly. There's trends, where it's down for several years, and then we can get a boom year, what I would call, just really good production. And so that's certainly what we're hoping for. It can turn around quickly, but that's why we're always focused on not just Mississippi, but states across the United States with investing in breeding habitat for waterfowl, habitat conservation. It doesn't just happen by accident. Those lands are very valuable for lots of uses, and so there's a lot of competing uses for prairie grasslands. Whether it's farming or otherwise, and so having some funding dedicated going to habitat conservation on the breeding grounds is important. So when we do get those wet years, there's habitat there that's available, and they're able to capitalize on it.
When we come back on the other side, we'll get a report from Houston about how the public land side of things performed this year. They do a great job of capturing data. Speaking of harvest data, they've got tons of harvest data that they look at. And it's the same kind of data we need to get on the white-tailed deer side. But people get accustomed to doing what they need to do to help us manage the resource. And same would be true on deer for sure, if we could get it across the finish line. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Havens. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. We're visiting with my friend Houston Havens, who's head of the waterfowl program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And we're just talking ducks today, and also just our love of the outdoors. We're so fortunate in Mississippi to have what we have access to. And I think one of the reasons why it's so special is the amount of land that's available, public land that's available to Mississippians. And you think about on the duck side, man, there's just so many really cool places to hunt ducks. And of course, you can go to the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks website to really get a feel for that. We've actually gone down the list before. We've got literally, Houston and I have covered every single public hunting opportunity and given you a sense of how things are going in each of those. We won't necessarily do that today, but we'll give you some highlights from that for sure. But the department has really worked hard to make the public duck hunting scenarios in Mississippi as good as they possibly can be. And it has really paid off, hasn't it, Houston?
It has. It's a year-round work task, trying to, as soon as the water's coming off and the growing season starts, which won't be too long here in Mississippi, it's time to get back out and start monitoring and planning for this coming fall's waterfowl habitat.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work. But so if you just freeze frame the public side of things, all the work you guys did, talk about just generally, how did it go? Which particular areas outperformed, and just kind of give us a sense of that.
Yeah. So overall, I was just looking at some numbers here with some of our waterfowl intense, I guess, areas is what I would call them. Over the last 15 years or so, we were only just a little bit off of average as far as total harvest across those areas. And so there were certainly some areas that were up and down. As far as areas that were up or had pretty good years, Sunflower Wildlife Management Area was one that had a really good year as far as reported harvest and hunter activity. There was a whole lot of use there. Because we had rainfall, we had water there, like you talked about. We got some key rains at really important times of year. Devaney WMA, one of our draw hunt only areas, also had a really good year there. One of its highest, maybe its highest ever as far as total harvest. And then Mahana also had a really good year, just fairly consistent across the year. And so looking at WMA harvest, hunter effort, like I said, we were down just a little bit off of average, less than 10% off of average, which is a little bit surprising, just to hear, some of the people who didn't have a really good duck season. Those are typically the people that we hear more from, myself included. I kind of get a little bit frustrated when things aren't going well. But looking at the harvest numbers and then also our aerial survey numbers throughout the season, we were more of a kind of a natural progression through the season as opposed to the year before, where it was really bleak and really dry until the very end when we got a cold snap and bumped up there around average. So I would say overall, just kind of encapsulating the season with the two metrics that we have to look at, WMA harvest and then our waterfowl survey data, we were just slightly below average, not too bad off.
Well, see, Houston, one of the things that has happened, and you and I have talked about this a bunch of times, but for people who haven't heard us talk about it before, is that in some of these wildlife management areas, the duck hunting has become really popular. So you had to really work, the departments had to work to manage demand. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really tough balancing act. We try to offer what we call a diverse portfolio of hunting opportunity across wildlife management areas. We have some areas that are just open to hunt whenever the waterfowl hunting season is open. People tell us that is important, just having a place to go. But then we also try to manage that pressure a little more to provide a little more of a quality hunting opportunity with some of our draw hunt areas. Just because, like you said, if an area is just wide open to pressure, it's still important for having a place to go when somebody has the opportunity and the time off to go. But managing that pressure can often lead to a better hunting experience for the people that are able to go.
Listen, when I was over in New Orleans as president of NOLA Media Group, I had a bunch of duck hunters who worked for the company. Obviously, some were from South Louisiana, and they would share with me videos of what it looked like going from public ramps and going out into the marsh. And like one of the guys who worked with me had a duck boat that he had supercharged, and I'm just duck boat. I'm not kidding you. It would go 50 miles an hour, maybe even faster. It's scary to think about that, but it was, it was built for it. It was amazing. It was amazing what he could do with his boat. But he wasn't the only one. There were several of them that had boats like that. So I remember when my friend Terry and I used to fish for the Southern Kingfish Association kingfish tournaments all around the United States. I mean, we watched the boats get faster and faster and faster and faster. It was a race to the fishing grounds. And in some cases, fishing grounds might be 2 hours away. I mean, we were running 60, 70 miles an hour out there. I mean, it was just incredible, the advancements in technology. But, it's true. And it became really unsafe, to be honest with you. I mean, you see some of these videos. My son Jordan shared a video with me this weekend. And I don't know if it was Mississippi. It might have been Arkansas. But here's what they found is that some of the duck calls are a little bit further away from the starting point. So the starting point is here, and you have to wait here. And to get to the holes, you have to walk a long distance. And you guys don't allow four-wheelers and other things. But you don't say you don't allow horses. And so there were guys on horses rushing to these duck calls. It was a horse race. I mean, people are super innovative, but man, it even in that scenario, it looked dangerous. The way this thing was stacking up. I mean, what have you seen?
Sure. Yeah, I've seen that video, and you're right. It's very competitive for. We do have a lot of public land here in Mississippi, but we have a lot of duck hunters as well, a lot of public duck hunters, and so providing enough area for them, especially the areas that have become really popular. People have success in an area and word gets out and it becomes more and more popular. So yeah, it's a balancing act, not only with the types of hunts that are provided, but also just trying to keep up with issues that may not be, a safe environment and trying to address those with regulations, with rules, things like that. And so we're always evaluating when we hear from people who are going out and having these experiences and giving us feedback on, maybe some things that need to be tweaked. We try not to be overbearing with regulations on areas, but they're just like you said, there's always innovation that can come up with, ways to get around, things that are not necessarily addressed in regulations.
Hey, do you guys also track? I know it's tracked by the department. I'm curious if you pay attention to it. Excuse me, hunting accidents related to duck hunting. Do you track that?
I don't specifically track that. We typically don't have very many major accidents. You do hear about those from time to time, but we've been very fortunate over the last few years to have limited number at least of those. I know our law enforcement division tracks citations and incidents like that, but I don't have that readily available.
Here's the thing I'm surprised about, and I guess it really comes back to hunters are being careful, because you think about like this land I was telling you that my friends bought adjacent to some land that I lease. One of the tracks to where the best holes are is all the way across this lake, and it's a lake that's not round, but it's sort of semi-thin, but it's very long. It's a long lake. So to get to the other end, you have to go across cypress knots, and you have to kind of work your way down. And on mornings when you could have a little ice, you have cypress knots, you got 3 or 4 people in the boat. I mean, it would be really easy for that boat to tump over. I mean, or somebody to fall out of the boat. Maybe that's happening and we don't hear about it, and people just they survive and they move on. I know there's been cases where they didn't survive. I hear that, but you would think you would hear more of that because there's a lot more of that kind of hunting happening. And I guess that hunters are realize the danger, and they're doing everything in their power to try to stay as safe as they possibly can.
Yeah, you're right. We don't have a lot of those incidences reported, but I think that is what's happening. First of all, there's hunter education, there's boater education that, there are requirements here in Mississippi. And so that helps a lot. And then I think it's also because waterfowl hunting kind of takes going with somebody who's experienced, just from the regulation side of things, from the waterfowl identification side of things. I think they're also in those like boating scenarios, things like that. People are a lot of times are going with somebody who's really experienced and knows the area, and so that probably helps a lot with those situations.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine many years ago. He and his friend they capsized and they both died of hypothermia, unfortunately. And you unfortunately hear those stories from time to time. That's why I always end every show with please, for God's sake, put safety first. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Houston Havens. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I had the pleasure this afternoon, of visiting with my friend Houston Havens, who's head of the waterfowl program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And we've been talking about ducks, and we want more ducks. And what's interesting? The season gets done, and as I have, with William McKinley and others, the other people who work in the private lands program, the phone starts to ring because people say, "Okay, what can we do to improve?" People are debriefing the season, and they're saying, "Okay, well, can we improve this? Can we do that? What do we need to do?" I bet your phone starts to ring with people who want to improve their duck possibilities for next year.
It is, just like you said, as soon as the season ends, it becomes a busy time of year again, for different reasons. And a lot of people, because it's fresh on their mind, just with things that maybe they need to look at improving, whether that's pipes and levees, kind of infrastructure, with improving where water is on the property. We get a lot of those phone calls this time of year. And then working with our wildlife management area staff to talk about how to draw the water down, because we've got a lot of water that's still out there. Birds are still using it before spring migration, but how to best manage the type of habitat that we want going into the growing season and this fall to be able to feed ducks when they come back. that takes a lot of planning on the front end. It doesn't just happen by accident, because there's a lot of situations that can go wrong. It takes a lot of monitoring, a lot of active management from basically as soon as spring starts through the fall.
Wow. So I didn't, that's interesting because I thought what you would say would be, oh, a lot about super modifications and blah, blah, blah. But what you're saying, this water drawdown point is one I hadn't thought about before, because you want ducks to come back, don't you?
That's right, right. We don't want to pull the water out from under them before they're gone. That's a really important time for birds that were here at the end of the duck season, and then also birds that were south of us, along the Gulf Coast, all the way up until mid-April or so. We'll have a lot of blue-winged teal that are still, just kind of blowing through, and they'll be stopping and using seasonal wetlands, shallow water areas as they're moving northward. They're always in a hurry. I always say, they're the last ones to get back on the breeding grounds, and then they'll be the first ones to crank out a nest and head back south. So a lot of other non-waterfowl benefits to having wetlands during the spring and early summer. And so it all kind of plays into the much larger picture. But yeah, our phones will start ringing from private landowners. I've got a couple of visits late this week actually to kind of get things kicked off, and we'll just have a really busy period basically throughout the summer.
Hey, you know what's interesting? You and I we've had almost entire shows talking about wood ducks and the efforts to monitor wood ducks. But the wood duck hunting, as a general rule, has stayed pretty strong in Mississippi, hasn't it?
It has. Wood ducks were a really interesting case this past year with, basically 2 years of drought. There was very little red oak production, which, water and willow oaks are kind of two really key species. Because of the size of acorns, they're small enough for wood ducks to eat. And so we heard from a lot of people that were really concerned about wood duck distributions just because they weren't seeing them in those areas that they normally do. What we think happened was they just shifted because they had to go find a different food resource. And so for all the people who weren't seeing ducks like me in normal areas along these creek bottoms and all, there were also areas where we were like, hearing really, reports of really large numbers of wood ducks that are kind of concentrated in those food areas. But yeah, wood duck's a really interesting species, state duck of Mississippi. We do a lot of banding during the summertime, and so kind of getting geared up and making plans for trying to trap and band a lot of those birds that are resident here in Mississippi later this summer as well.
That's actually, it comes back to a really important point. You and I have talked about this before, but as someone from South Mississippi who used to go to the Delta and see good flights of ducks, my friends would tell me, this is not ducks. Ducks are thousands of ducks. Well, the days of thousands of ducks may be gone. And they would determine whether a hunt was successful or not based on how many greenheads they shot. But I think people are beginning to maybe change their expectations a little bit to say, a duck hunt is a duck hunt. We want the opportunity to bring them in. We want the opportunity to shoot at them. We want the opportunity to eat them. We want the camaraderie that comes with that, and we're not going to be so picky. We want to enjoy it. And wood ducks is an area where we can continue to learn and maybe have some success, with managing.
Absolutely. We have duck hunting that happens in every county of the state, and we have wood ducks in all those counties as well. So it's a really important species. Just like you said, it's not necessarily a high harvest species in the Mississippi Delta where we have a much wider diversity of birds using those areas, but still a very important species. It was really important a few years ago when we were able to go from 2 to 3 wood ducks in the bag. That was a really big boost for a large portion of the state. So a really important species. And you're right, we do hear from duck hunters who are very reasonable in their expectations. Everybody who's hunting in an area that could have mallards, they want to shoot mallards, but other species are just as important.
I think that's a great point. Listen, thank you for spending some time with me today, my friend.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
You bet. This has been Houston Havens, head of the Waterfowl Program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Listen, have a great week. And for those of you who will be out turkey hunting, have a safe time. Always put safety first. We'll see you next Monday. God bless you.